Assalamu alaikum dear students and welcome to Advanced Research Methods course. My name is Farhan Sarwar and today we are going to discuss the language and process of research. The outline is as follows. First of all, I will tell you about some basic terminologies in research. Then there will be a discussion about theory, deduction and induction, and lastly, we will have an overview of hypothetico-deductive research approach. So starting with certain terminologies in research. We do research to understand, explain and predict certain phenomena. We might want to answer certain questions related to our organization. For instance, what will be the department's reaction if we introduce a new MIS system? Or why did the stock market prices surge higher when all normal indicators suggested that it would go down? To understand these, we might need to learn few terminologies in the start. So terminologies that we're going to discuss today are concept, construct, operational definition, and variables. To understand and communicate information about certain objects, events, or things or concepts that we are using in our research, there must be a common ground on which to do it. So, a concept is a generally accepted collection of meanings or characteristics associated with certain events, objects, conditions, situation, and behaviors. For example, what comes to your mind when we take the name spreadsheet? Perhaps you would think of Microsoft Excel, you would think of something in a form of tables with numbers, headings, formulas, calculations, data, etc. The challenge when we talk about a concept is to develop it in such a way that others will clearly understand. For instance, we want to define the concept of income because we are actually estimating a family's total income of our survey participants. It may be simple, unambiguous concept, but we may receive varying and confusing answers. So we might need to restrict our concept by specifying certain parameters such as time period, income before or after income taxes? Are we asking for income for head of family only or for all family members? Are we asking about income from salary and wages only, or we also want them to add their dividends, interest or other kinds of incomes? A construct is defined as an image or abstract idea which specifically invented for a given research or a theory building purpose. So, it is degree to which concept does or does not have something objective to refer to identify, which means a concept can be objective, such as a table, which is a very objective concept because you can see it, it is in front of you, it is a tangible item, you have a visual of that item, or perhaps a concept can be abstract, and that abstract concept is called a construct. Here we have an example of a construct which is personality, which is very abstract because we cannot see it. However, we can measure certain aspects or certain dimensions of personality using different methods that we will discuss later on. An operational definition is a definition of a construct or a concept which is stated in terms of specific criteria for testing or measurement. It actually means how are we going to measure a specific construct? How will you measure level of education like metric, under metric, intermediate, graduate, postgraduate, MPhil, PhD, and etc. So, it is your time to think that how will you operationalize gender, and of course our last optimism is a bit of more abstract concept, which we may need certain more parameters to operationalize. The next terminology is a variable. The term variable in research is often used as a synonym for construct or a property that is being studied. Of course, we are studying that property or that concept because its values keep on changing. In the context of research, a variable is a symbol of an event, act, characteristic, trait, or attribute that can be measured and to which we can assign values. Our next topic is theory. Theory is very important whenever we are talking about a scientific approach to research. In essence, a theory is a partially verified statement of a scientific relationship that cannot be directly observed. If the theory is stated formally, so these statements consist of a set of interrelated propositions. These propositions attempt to specify the relationship between different variables, or perhaps relationship between a set of variables and some behaviors. When a theory is verified to an extent that it cannot be refuted or it has been substantially verified, it becomes a law. Here I would like to quote an example of a famous stress theory which is called conservation of resource theory. Conservation of a resource theory describes the motivation that drives humans to maintain their current resources and to pursue their new resources, because by the essence of this theory, resources are related to stress. The theory was proposed by Dr. Stephen Hopfall in 1989, and the purpose was to expand the literature of stress by taking stress as a construct. Hopfall posited that psychological stress occurs due to three reasons: when there is a threat of a loss of resource, or there is an actual loss of resource, or a lack of gained resources after the resources has been spent. From this perspective, resources are defined as things that one values. So, resources can be some objects, a state of mind, or a condition such as health. CUR or conservation of resource theory states that loss of these resources will drive an individual into a certain level of stress, and the individual will try to maintain their resources so that their stress level decreases. When we are discussing about theory, it is also pertinent to discuss what is a model, because model is conceptually close to a theory. It is defined as a representation of a system that is constructed to study some aspect of a system or the whole system. They differ from theories such that a theory tries to explain certain phenomena, often with words, or a theory explains the reason why phenomena occur, whereas a model's role is more of representing that phenomena, and often in terms of a figure or with statements. Models can be both general or specific. A researcher often develops a specific model in his or her research when there is a theory which describes the phenomena and the theory is mentioned in the literature. However, sometimes models can be more general, which represent a specific pattern of relationship between different types of variables. A model tries to increase our understanding, prediction, and control when the environment is more complex. I would like to explain this by an example of job demand resource model. As you can see in the figure, on the left hand side you can see job demands and job resources. Often we call them the predictor variables, and on the right hand side, as you can see, this is the outcome variable, and in the between these are the mediators which we will discuss later on. So what is a job demand resource model? It is an occupational stress model which suggests that stress is a response to imbalance between the demands and the resources that a person has to deal with those demands. So this model puts the working condition of an individual into two categories: job demands and job resources. Demands are physical and emotional stressors in the job roles. These demands can be time pressure, heavy workload, stressful working environment, emotional labor, poor relationship, and so on and so forth. Resources, on the other hand, are some physical, social, or organizational factors that are helpful to achieve goals, and they also reduce stress. Moreover, demands leads to strain and resources leads to motivation. So resources can be something that is by virtue of your job, like autonomy, work relationship, opportunity for development, or perhaps other tangible resources. We can say that when job demands are high and job resources are low, this results into stress and burnout. On the other hand, if job resources are high, they can offset the effect of job demands and encourage more motivation and job engagement. When we say a researcher is adopting a deductive reasoning, it means that there is an application of a general theory to a specific case that is being observed. A manager wants to know that how come increased workload affects the job engagement of employee in a bank. For that purpose, the manager can apply conservation of resource theory or job demand resource model to understand it. On the other hand, when we are saying or we're talking about inductive reasoning, it is a process where we observe specific phenomena and then arrive at general conclusion. So if a manager sees that there are some employees who are stressful, manager might interview few employees to identify what are the reasons they are stressful and develop a general hypothesis. Both inductive and deductive processes are often used in research, can be used at a time. This diagram explains that how we can combine induction and deduction in a research process. This process is actually termed as double movement of reflective thoughts. So from where it starts from fact 1 that you promoted a new product but the sales does not increase. That is fact 1. Then you ask the question why the sale did not increase. That is an induction, because it is a specific problem and you want to generalize that why the sales is not increasing. Then in step 3, you infer a conclusion to answer the question. That means you developed a hypothesis. The hypothesis is the promotion was poorly executed. Then you use this hypothesis to conclude, and this conclusion is basically deduction, that sales will not increase if there is a poor execution of promotion. And then your second deduction is that we need an effective promotion strategy to increase the sales. And this converts into fact 2, run an effective promotion and sales will increase. The induction and deduction leads to a very popular research method, which is the hypothetico-deductive method of research. This research approach pursues a step-by-step, logical, organized and rigorous method, which of course we have previously discussed as a scientific approach to find a solution to a problem. In this method, as is shown in figure in front of you, first we identify a broad problem area. So if the manager notices a drops in sales or incorrect accounting result, or there is a low yield on investment or any other problem, this is step number 1. The second step is to define the problem statement, which we will discuss in detail in our next lecture. This is why this is important, because a scientific research always starts with a definite aim or purpose. And a problem statement basically states the general objective and research question of the research. The third step is to develop a hypothesis. Hypotheses, as mentioned earlier, are some tentative and testable statements which defines the association between the variables. In essence, a hypothesis converts a problem statement into testable statements. There are two basic requirements. Number one, a hypothesis is testable, and number two, a hypothesis must be falsifiable. That means it should be proven wrong if not correct. The fourth approach is to determine the ways by which we can measure the variables that are of interest. And as we have discussed few slides before, that some variables cannot be measured quantitatively, such as employees' behavior, such as employee stress, such as employees' personalities. And we need to operationalize these variables. So we will discuss this operationalization and measurement of variables in detail later on. The fifth step is data collection. We need to define certain ways by how to collect data, and this is a very important part of a research design. We need to obtain data with respect to each variable in the hypothesis that we have defined earlier. There are two types of data: quantitative data, which is numerical or that can be converted into numbers, and qualitative data, which is based upon some text, words, or observations. The next step in hypothetico-deductive research is data analysis. In this step, the data we have gathered earlier is either statistically or by using some other technique is analyzed, and we see if the hypothesis that we have generated either it is supported or not. We can conduct an analysis of both quantitative and qualitative data to determine if certain relationships that we have defined are they viable or not. The last step is to interpret the data. Now we must decide whether our hypotheses are supported or not, which tells us that which recommendations we need to give to solve the problem which we started in step number 1. Let me elaborate this hypothetico-deductive research approach with an example from the organization. It starts like this: that the CIO or Chief Information Officer of a firm observes that newly installed management information system is not being used by middle level managers as much as was originally expected. So the CIO says that there really is a problem here. That is step number 1. So what does the CIO does is that start talking to some of the middle level managers and finds that many of them have very little idea as to what MIS is or what kind of information it could provide and how to access it and utilize it, which leads CIO to a more thorough literature survey. So going on to internet, finding some research paper, the CIO finds certain further information which is previously published, and that search indicates that many middle level managers are not familiar with how to operate computers, and the lack of information about what MIS offer can be another reason why managers do not choose it. So based on all this information, the CIO develops a theory incorporating all the relevant factors which contribute to the lack of access to the MIS by managers in the organization. And this is actually a problem statement. The third step, based on the previous information and the theory, the CIO generates various hypotheses for testing, such as knowledge of the usefulness of MIS would help managers to put it to greater use. The next step is to develop measures. So the CIO then develops a short questionnaire on the various factors theorized to influence the use of MIS by managers, such as the extent of knowledge of what MIS is, what kind of information MIS provides, how to gain access to the information, the level of comfort felt by managers in using computers, and how often managers have used MIS in the preceding months. Then, the CIO start data collection using survey. Later on, after the data is collected, the CIO started the analysis. Lastly, based on the result, the manager deduces or concludes the managers do not use MIS due to the certain factors such as they do not have the knowledge of computer, and these deductions help the CIO to take necessary action to solve the problem, which might include, among other things, to organize seminars to train managers on use of computers and to tell them about the usefulness of MIS. So this is our end of lecture number 3. We will meet again in lecture number 4.